Lewis Hamilton had everything a man could want: 7 Formula One championships, millions of fans, a mansion in Monaco, fame beyond imagination. But at 11:47 p.m. on March 15, 2025, one phone call would change everything he thought he knew about family, love, and what it truly means to win. The caller was Zara Mitchell, the woman who broke his heart 2 years ago. Her voice was shaking with panic. Her sister Emma was dying in a London hospital, and she was asking for Lewis specifically. But Emma had a secret, one that would turn Lewis's world upside down and put an innocent child's life in deadly danger. What started as a simple request for help would become the most important race of Lewis's life. Not for a trophy or a championship, but for something far more precious. A little girl who would call him Uncle Lewis and change his heart forever. Some victories can't be measured in lap times or podium finishes. Sometimes, the greatest triumph comes from knowing when to walk away from everything you've built to protect the family you never knew you needed. This is the story of how a midnight call from an ex-girlfriend led to Lewis Hamilton's most important decision and the fight that would define the rest of his life. The glow from Lewis Hamilton's laptop screen painted his face blue in the darkness of his Monaco mansion. It was 11:47 p.m. on March 15, 2025, and sleep felt impossible. The Australian Grand Prix replay flickered across the screen for the third time that night. Turn 14. That's where everything went wrong. Lewis rubbed his tired eyes and reached for his water bottle. The race had been 3 days ago, but the disappointment still stung. 4th place. Not terrible, but not what he expected from his Mercedes either. At 40 years old, every race felt more important than the last. Time was running out to add to his championship collection. His phone buzzed on the glass coffee table. The sound echoed in the quiet room, making him jump slightly. Lewis glanced at the caller ID and froze. Zara M. His finger hovered over the screen. Zara Mitchell. They hadn't spoken in over a year, not since their messy breakup in 2023. She was a sports journalist for BBC, brilliant and tough. They had dated for 3 years, and Lewis thought she might be the one. But racing always came first, and Zara got tired of being second. The phone kept buzzing. Lewis knew he should let it go to voicemail, but something made him answer. Hello, Lewis. Zara's voice was shaky, desperate. Thank God you picked up. He could hear traffic in the background, car horns, the sounds of London at night. Zara, what's wrong? Are you okay? I'm at St. Mary's Hospital. Her words came out in a rush. It's Emma. She collapsed at her studio tonight. The doctors, they say she needs surgery right away. Emma. Lewis's chest tightened. Emma Mitchell, Zara's younger sister. Sweet, artistic Emma who painted the most beautiful pictures Lewis had ever seen. She was 28 now, but Lewis still remembered her as the shy girl who would blush when he visited Zara's family home. What happened? Lewis stood up, his racing footage forgotten. Her heart, Zara whispered. You know she's always had problems with her heart. But this time it's bad, Lewis. Really bad. Lewis did know. Emma had been born with a rare heart condition. During his relationship with Zara, he had quietly paid for some of Emma's medical treatments. The family never knew it was him. He just couldn't stand the thought of Emma suffering when he had the money to help. Is she going to be okay? I don't know. Zara's voice cracked. The doctors are being careful with their words. They say the surgery is risky, but they have to do it tonight. Lewis was already moving toward his bedroom, his mind racing. What do you need? How can I help? I know I have no right to ask this, Zara said. Not after everything that happened between us. But Emma, she's been asking for you. For me? Lewis pulled a suitcase from his closet. But I haven't seen her in 2 years. She talks about you sometimes. She always said you were like the big brother she never had. Lewis, I'm scared. I'm really scared. The fear in Zara's voice made Lewis's decision easy. I'm coming to London. I'll be there as soon as I can. You don't have to do that. I know you're busy with racing, and Zara, stop. Lewis was already packing clothes into his bag. Emma is family. She was always family to me, even after, there was silence on the other end. Then Zara spoke again, her voice even quieter than before. There's something else, Lewis. Something I need to tell you when you get here. About Emma. About why she really wanted to see you. Lewis stopped packing. What do you mean? I can't explain over the phone. It's complicated. But Lewis, she's been keeping something from all of us. Something important. What kind of something? Just please come. Please. She might not make it through the surgery, and if she doesn't, Zara's voice broke completely. If she doesn't, this secret dies with her. Louis felt cold despite the warm Monaco air coming through his open window. Zara, you're scaring me. What secret? I found some things in her apartment when I went to get her insurance cards. Letters. Documents. Louis, I think Emma has been living a whole different life than what she's been telling us. The phone line crackled with static. Louis could hear his heartbeat in his ears. What kind of different life? She's been asking for you specifically. She says she has something important to tell you. Something that changes everything. Louis sat down on his bed, his suitcase half-packed beside him. Changes everything how? I don't know. But Louis, she made me promise to call you if something happened to her. She made me promise months ago. She said if she ever ended up in the hospital, you were the first person I should call. Months ago? Zara, what aren't you telling me? Just come, please. I'm at St. Mary's Hospital in Paddington. I'll text you the exact address. The surgery is supposed to start at 3 a.m. If you leave now, you might make it in time to see her before. She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. I'm already packing, Louis said. I'll call my pilot. I can be there in 4 hours. Thank you. Zara's relief was obvious. I know this is strange, asking you to come after everything. But Emma always loved you, Louis. Even after we broke up, she would ask about you sometimes. She said you were the only person who ever really understood her art. Louis remembered those conversations with Emma about her paintings. She would show him her work, and he would actually look at it, really look at it. Not just polite glances, but genuine interest. Emma painted emotions, and Louis had always been drawn to that honesty. I'm booking the flight now, he said, pulling out his other phone to call his pilot. Zara, is there anything else you need? Anything I can do? Just get here safely. And Louis? Yeah? Whatever Emma tells you, please don't judge her. She's been through a lot these past 2 years. More than any of us knew. The line went quiet except for the sound of London traffic. Louis could picture Zara standing outside the hospital, probably pacing, probably crying. He knew her well enough to know she was trying to be strong for her family. I'll be there soon, he promised. Thank you, Louis. Really, I know Emma will be so happy to see you. After they hung up, Louis sat in his dark bedroom for a moment. The racing footage still played on his laptop in the living room, but it seemed meaningless now. Emma was in a hospital bed, fighting for her life, and she had secrets that somehow involved him that he finished packing quickly and called his pilot. The private jet would be ready in an hour. As he drove through the empty Monaco streets toward the airport, Louis couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Whatever Emma needed to tell him, whatever secret she'd been keeping. It was important enough that she'd asked for him specifically. Important enough that Zara had swallowed her pride to make the call. Louis pressed harder on the accelerator. Emma had always been special to him, like a little sister he'd never had. If she needed him, he would be there. Whatever it was, they would face it together. The airport lights appeared ahead, and Louis felt his heart racing faster than it did before any Formula One race. Some things were more important than championships, and Emma Mitchell was definitely one of them. The private jet's engines hummed steadily as Louis stared out the window at the darkness below. England was still 2 hours away, but his mind was already in that hospital room with Emma. He couldn't stop thinking about the last time he'd seen her. It was Christmas 2022, just before his relationship with Zara fell apart. Emma had been at her parents' house in Surrey, painting by the window in her father's study. She'd been working on a portrait of an old man feeding pigeons in the park. The detail was incredible. You could see the kindness in the man's eyes, the gentle way he held the breadcrumbs. It's beautiful, Louis had said, genuinely amazed. Emma had blushed, like she always did when someone praised her work. It's just practice. I'm not very good yet. Are you kidding? This is gallery-level stuff, Emma. You should be selling these. She'd looked up at him with those big brown eyes, so full of hope and doubt at the same time. Do you really think so? I know so, Louis had said, and he'd meant it. That was Emma. Talented beyond belief, but never quite believing in herself. Louis had always wanted to help her see what everyone else could see, that she was special. The flight attendant offered him coffee, but Louis waved her away. His stomach was already twisted in knots. He pulled out his phone and read Zara's text again. St. Mary's Hospital, Paddington. ICU, 4th floor. Surgery scheduled for 3 a.m. Thank you for coming. It was now 1:30 a.m. If everything went perfectly, he might make it in time. Louis closed his eyes and tried to calm his racing thoughts. But memories of Emma kept flooding back. She'd been 19 when he first met her, fresh out of art school and full of dreams. Zara had brought him home to meet her parents, and Emma had been so nervous she'd spilled tea all over herself. "Sorry," she'd whispered, her face red with embarrassment. "I'm such a klutz." "Don't worry about it," Louis had said with a smile. "I once spilled an entire bottle of water on my race suit right before a qualifying session, in front of 20,000 people." Emma had laughed then, a real laugh that lit up her whole face. From that moment, Louis had felt protective of her. She was like the little sister he'd never had. Over the 3 years he dated Zara, Louis had watched Emma grow into herself. She'd gotten braver about showing her art, more confident in her opinions. She'd started working at a small gallery in Camden, learning the business side of art. Louis had been proud of her progress, but there had always been something fragile about Emma too. Her heart condition meant she got tired easily, couldn't do too much physical activity. Louis had learned to notice when she was having a bad day. She'd get quiet. Her breathing would become shallow. That's when he'd started secretly paying for her medical treatments. Zara's family had good insurance, but some of the specialists Emma needed weren't covered. Louis had worked with her doctors directly, making sure Emma got the best care possible. He'd made them promise never to tell the family where the money came from. "What?" Dr. Peterson had asked during one of their phone calls. "Why do you want to help her?" Louis had thought about it for a long time before answering. "Because she makes the world more beautiful. People like Emma shouldn't have to suffer because of money." The plane began its descent into Heathrow. Louis felt his ears pop and checked his watch. 2:15 a.m. He still had a chance. His phone buzzed with another message. From Zara. Surgery moved to 3:30 a.m. Emma is stable but scared. She keeps asking if you're coming. Louis typed back quickly. "Landing now. Be there in 45 minutes." The plane touched down smoothly, and Louis was the first one off. He'd called ahead to have his McLaren P1 ready at the private terminal. The bright orange sports car was waiting for him, keys in the ignition. Louis threw his bag in the passenger seat and roared out of the airport. The London roads were mostly empty at this hour, but Louis drove carefully. Getting to Emma wouldn't help anyone. If he crashed on the way, as he drove through the sleeping city, more memories came back. Emma's 25th birthday party, when she'd painted a small portrait of Louis as a thank you gift. It showed him not in his racing suit, but in regular clothes, smiling genuinely. She'd somehow captured a version of him that felt more real than any professional photo. "I wanted to paint the Louis I know," she'd explained. "Not the famous one. Just you." Louis had been touched beyond words. He'd hung the painting in his Monaco apartment, and it was still there. Then there was the time Emma had called him, crying, because a gallery owner had rejected her work. Louis had spent 2 hours on the phone with her, talking her through the disappointment, reminding her that rejection was just part of the process. "Every artist gets rejected," he'd told her. "Even the famous ones. It doesn't mean you're not good enough." "But what if I'm fooling myself?" Emma had asked. "What if I'm just not talented enough?" "Emma, I've seen your work. I've seen how it makes people feel. You're not fooling yourself. You're just facing the hard parts of following your dreams." That conversation had happened just a few months before his relationship with Zara ended. Louis wondered now if Emma had been going through more than just normal artist struggles. Zara had mentioned secrets, a different life than what the family knew about. The hospital came into view, a massive building with lights and many windows. Louis found a parking spot and grabbed his bag. His hands were shaking slightly as he walked. Through the automatic doors, the ICU was on the 4th floor, just like Zara had said. Louis took the elevator up, his heart pounding. The hallway was quiet except for the beeping of machines and the soft voices of nurses. He found the waiting room and saw them immediately. Zara was pacing by the window, her dark hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked exhausted, her eyes red from crying. Her parents, Margaret and David Mitchell, sat holding hands on uncomfortable plastic chairs. "Louis," Margaret stood up when she saw him. "Oh, thank goodness you're here." Louis hugged her, feeling how small and worried she seemed. Margaret had always been kind to him, even after the breakup with Zara. She was a retired teacher, gentle and wise. "How is she?" Lewis asked. Stable, David said, standing to shake Lewis's hand. But the doctors are being careful. They say her heart is in worse shape than they thought. Zara stopped pacing and looked at Lewis. For a moment, they just stared at each other. So much history between them. So many things that had been said and couldn't be taken back. Thank you for coming, Zara said quietly. I know this is weird. But it's not weird, Lewis interrupted. Emma is family. She's always been family. Zara's eyes filled with tears again. She's been asking for you every few minutes. She's scared, Lewis. I've never seen her this scared. Can I see her? The doctor said we could visit for a few minutes before surgery. But Lewis. Zara grabbed his arm. There's something I need to tell you first. About what I found in her apartment. Lewis felt his stomach drop. What kind of things? Letters. Legal documents. And Zara looked around to make sure her parents couldn't hear. And baby clothes. Baby clothes. Lewis's voice came out as a whisper, hidden in her closet. Tiny clothes, like for a newborn. And a crib, still in the box. Lewis, I think Emma has been hiding a pregnancy from us. The world seemed to tilt around Lewis. Emma, pregnant? But when? With who? And why would she hide it from her family? Are you sure? He asked. I'm not sure about anything anymore, Zara said. But she's been acting strange for months. Canceling family dinners, not answering her phone. Mom thought she was just busy with work, but now, a doctor in scrubs approached them. Family of Emma Mitchell? Yes, David said, standing up quickly. I'm Dr. Sarah Chun. I'll be performing Emma's surgery. She's ready now, but she's specifically asking to see Lewis Hamilton. Are you Lewis? Lewis nodded, his mouth dry. She's been quite insistent, Dr. Chun said with a small smile. She says she has something important to tell you before the surgery. Lewis looked at Zara, who nodded encouragingly. Go, she said. We'll be right here. Dr. Chun led Lewis down a quiet hallway to a room with glass walls. Inside, Emma lay on a hospital bed, connected to various machines. She looked so small and pale, but her eyes were alert and focused. Lewis, she whispered when she saw him. You came? Of course I came. Lewis sat in the chair beside her bed and took her hand. How are you feeling? Scared, Emma admitted. But better now that you're here. The surgery is going to go fine, Lewis said, trying to sound confident. Dr. Chun seems very good. Lewis, I need to tell you something. Emma's grip on his hand tightened. Before the surgery, in case something happens. Nothing is going to happen, Lewis said firmly. But if it does, I need you to know the truth. About what I've been hiding from everyone. Lewis felt his heart racing again. Emma, whatever it is, you don't have to. I do, she interrupted. Lewis, I need to tell you about the baby. The words hit Lewis like a physical blow. So Zara had been right that Emma's eyes filled with tears, but she kept talking. Lewis, I have a daughter. Her name is Sophie, and she's 18 months old. I've been raising her alone, and nobody in my family knows she exists. Lewis stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. Emma, why didn't you tell anyone? Because I was scared. Because the father, he left when I told him about the pregnancy. Because I thought everyone would be disappointed in me. Emma, no one would be disappointed. Your family loves you. I know that now, Emma said, tears streaming down her face. But I was so scared, Lewis. I was young and alone, and I didn't know what to do. Where is she now? Sophie, with my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. She's been helping me take care of her. Lewis, if something happens to me during this surgery, I need you to help make sure Sophie is taken care of. I trust you more than anyone. Lewis felt overwhelmed. Emma had a daughter, a secret daughter that she'd been raising alone while battling her heart condition. No wonder she'd been acting strange. Emma, I promise you, nothing is going to happen. But yes, of course I'll help make sure Sophie is safe. There's more, Emma said, her voice getting weaker. About Sophie's father. You need to know the truth. About Marcus. A nurse appeared at the door. I'm sorry, but we need to take her to surgery now. Wait, Emma said, gripping Lewis's hand desperately. There's something else about Marcus. Something dangerous. He's been trying to… Emma, we really need to go. The nurse said kindly but firmly that as they wheeled Emma's bed toward the door, she looked back at Lewis with frightened eyes. Find Sophie, Lewis. Protect her. And watch out for Marcus Thompson. He's not what he seems. The door closed behind them, and Lewis was left alone in the empty room, his mind spinning with questions. Emma had a daughter, a secret daughter, and apparently, the father was someone named Marcus Thompson, someone dangerous enough that Emma was worried about him even as she went into surgery. Louis walked back to the waiting room in a daze. Zara looked up at him expectantly. "Well?" she asked. Louis sat down heavily in one of the plastic chairs. "She has a daughter," he said quietly. "Her name is Sophie. She's 18 months old." Margaret gasped. David put his arm around his wife. Zara just stared at Louis. "A daughter," Zara repeated. "Our Emma has a daughter, and she never told us." "She was scared," Louis explained. "The father left when she told him about the pregnancy. She's been raising Sophie alone." "Where is she? Where is the baby?" Margaret asked, already standing up. "With a neighbor named Mrs. Patterson. But there's more." Louis looked at Zara. "The father's name is Marcus Thompson. Emma seemed scared of him. She warned me to watch out for him." "Marcus Thompson," Zara repeated. "I've never heard that name before." "Well, we need to find this Sophie," David said firmly. "She's our granddaughter. Emma shouldn't have had to do this alone." As they sat in the waiting room, watching the clock tick toward 4 a.m., Louis couldn't stop thinking about Emma's last words. There was something else about Marcus Thompson, something she hadn't had time to tell him. And now Emma was in surgery, fighting for her life, while somewhere in London, a little girl named Sophie was waiting for her mother to come home. Louis pulled out his phone and started typing. He was going to find Sophie, and he was going to find out everything there was to know about Marcus Thompson. Emma had asked him to protect her daughter, and that's exactly what he was going to do. The surgery would take hours, but Louis was already planning his next move. Some secrets were worth keeping, but not when they put innocent people in danger. Emma's secret was out now, and Louis was going to make sure both she and Sophie were safe. At 4:15 a.m., Louis couldn't sit still any longer. The surgery had been going for 45 minutes, and the waiting was killing him. Margaret and David had dozed off in their chairs, holding hands even in sleep. Zara was staring at her phone, probably reading the same news articles over and over just to keep her mind busy. "I need to see Sophie," Louis said quietly. Zara looked up. "Now? But Emma's still in surgery." "That's exactly why I need to see her now. Emma asked me to protect her daughter. I can't do that sitting in this waiting room." Louis stood up and stretched. His back was sore from the uncomfortable plastic chair. "Do you have Emma's address?" "Yes, but Louis, it's the middle of the night. This Mrs. Patterson is probably sleeping, and we don't even know her. Then we'll wake her up." Louis's voice was firm. "Zara, your sister has been raising a baby alone for 18 months while dealing with a serious heart condition. She's been too scared to tell her own family. That tells me she's been in real trouble." Zara bit her lip, thinking, "You're right. And if this Marcus person is dangerous, exactly. Come with me. Your parents can call us if there's any news about the surgery." Zara shook her mother gently. "Mom, Louis and I are going to Emma's apartment to check on the baby." Margaret's eyes opened immediately. "The baby? Of course. Bring her here, Louis. Bring our granddaughter home." 20 minutes later, Louis and Zara were driving through the empty London streets toward Camden. Emma's apartment was in a converted Victorian house, the kind that looked charming during the day but seemed a bit spooky at night. "Third floor," Zara said, reading from her phone. "Apartment 3B." They climbed the narrow stairs, their footsteps echoing in the quiet building. Louis knocked softly on the door marked 3B. After a moment, they heard movement inside. "Who is it?" came a woman's voice, cautious but not unfriendly. "I'm Louis Hamilton. This is Zara Mitchell, Emma's sister. Emma is in the hospital, and she asked us to check on Sophie." The door opened to reveal a woman in her 60s with gray hair and kind eyes. She was wearing a pink bathrobe and looked like she'd been woken up, but she didn't seem annoyed. "Oh my goodness," she said. "Emma mentioned you might come. I'm Helen Patterson. Please, come in." Mrs. Patterson's apartment was small but cozy, filled with knitted blankets and the smell of tea. She led them to her living room, where a travel crib was set up near the window. "Sophie's sleeping," Mrs. Patterson whispered. "Poor little thing doesn't know what's happening. I told her Mummy had to go to the doctor, but she keeps asking when she's coming home." Louis and Zara approached the crib quietly. Inside, a small figure was curled up under a yellow blanket. All they could see was dark curly hair and tiny hands, clutching a stuffed rabbit. "She's beautiful," Zara whispered, tears in her eyes. "She looks just like Emma did as a baby." She's a sweet child, Mrs. Patterson said. Very smart, very artistic like her mother. She loves to draw with crayons, and she sings little songs to herself. Louis felt something tighten in his chest. This was Emma's daughter. Emma had been caring for this little girl all alone, working and dealing with her health problems and never asking for help. Mrs. Patterson, Louis said quietly, "How long have you been helping Emma?" "Since Sophie was born." Emma moved in next door when she was about 6 months pregnant. She was so young and scared, but determined to do right by her baby. They sat down on Mrs. Patterson's couch, and she put the kettle on for tea. Louis could see she was the kind of person who made tea for every situation. "Tell us about Marcus," Zara said. "The baby's father." Mrs. Patterson's expression changed immediately. Her kind face became worried, almost scared. "That man," she said, shaking her head. "He was trouble from the start." Emma met him at an art gallery where she was working. He seemed charming at first, very smooth talking. He told Emma he was an artist too. "What happened?" Louis asked. "Well, Emma fell for him hard. She thought he was this romantic, creative type, but I could see through him right away. He was too slick, too good at saying exactly what Emma wanted to hear." Mrs. Patterson poured hot water into a teapot and continued her story. When Emma told him she was pregnant, his true colors came out. First, he tried to convince her to not have the baby. When she refused, he got angry. Started saying terrible things about how she trapped him, how he never wanted children. Louis felt anger rising in his chest. What kind of man abandoned? A pregnant woman? Then he just disappeared? Zara asked. For about a year, yes. Emma was relieved, honestly. She said she'd rather raise Sophie alone than have that man around. But then, about 6 months ago, he started showing up again. Showing up how? Louis's voice was sharp, calling Emma, sending texts. At first, he said he wanted to meet Sophie, that he'd changed his mind about being a father. But Emma didn't trust him. She said something about him felt different, more desperate. Mrs. Patterson handed them each a cup of tea and sat back down. Then Emma found out why he was really interested. He'd been watching her, learning about her art career. Emma's paintings have been selling well lately. She had a small show at a gallery in Shoreditch last month, and several pieces sold for good money. "He wants money," Louis said. It wasn't a question. Exactly. Marcus started demanding to see Sophie, saying he had parental rights. But Emma did some research and found out he was married the whole time he was dating her. He has another family, a wife and 2 kids in Manchester. Zara nearly dropped her teacup. He was married? The whole time. Emma felt so stupid when she found out, but it wasn't her fault. He lied to her about everything. His real name isn't even Marcus Thompson. It's Mark Thompson, and he's been in trouble with the police before. Louis set down his tea and pulled out his phone. What kind of trouble? Fraud mostly. Fake art sales, forged documents. Emma found out he's been selling artwork that isn't his, claiming he painted pieces that other artists made, including Emma's work. Louis asked, already knowing the answer. Yes. Emma discovered he had photos of several of her paintings on his phone. She thinks he was planning to copy them and sell them as his own work. Louis was already typing on his phone, searching for information about Mark Thompson. Within minutes, he'd found a police record. Fraud, theft, harassment. This man was dangerous. "Mrs. Patterson, has he been here?" "To this building. Last week. He came by looking for Emma, but I told him she wasn't home. He got very angry, started shouting about his rights as Sophie's father. I threatened to call the police, and he left. But he knows where Emma lives," Zara said, her voice worried. "And he knows about Sophie." Louis added grimly that a soft cry came from the travel crib. Sophie was waking up. Mrs. Patterson went to her immediately, lifting the little girl gently. "Hello, sweetheart," she said softly. "It's okay. Mrs. Patterson is here." Sophie rubbed her eyes with tiny fists and looked around the room. When she saw Louis and Zara, she became shy, hiding her face against Mrs. Patterson's shoulder. "Sophie, these are friends of Mummy's," Mrs. Patterson said. "This is Zara, and this is Louis. Mummy told them about you." Sophie peeked out at them with Emma's big brown eyes. She had Emma's heart-shaped face and those same gentle features that made Emma so beautiful. "Hi, Sophie," Zara said softly, tears streaming down her face. "I'm your Aunt Zara." Louis felt something break open in his chest. This little girl was family. Emma's daughter was family, which made her his family too. in all the ways that mattered. She looks just like Emma, he said, quietly. Sophie studied Louis curiously, then pointed at him. Big man, she said in a tiny voice. Louis smiled despite everything. Yes, I'm pretty big, aren't I? Mrs. Patterson sat back down with Sophie on her lap. The little girl was fully awake now, looking back and forth between Louis and Zara. Mummy, Sophie asked, looking toward the door. Mummy is at the doctor, Mrs. Patterson explained gently. She'll be back soon. But Louis could see the worry in the older woman's eyes. Emma's surgery was serious, and there were no guarantees. Mrs. Patterson, Louis said, I want you to pack up Sophie's things. I'm taking her somewhere safe. Where? I have a house outside London. Private, secure. If Mark knows where Emma lives, then Sophie isn't safe here. Zara looked at him. Louis, we can't just take her. We don't have any legal rights. Emma asked me to protect her daughter. That's exactly what I'm going to do. Louis's phone buzzed with a text from Margaret. Surgery update. Everything going well so far. Doctor says 2 more hours. He showed the message to Zara, who relaxed slightly. Sophie needs to be somewhere Marcus can't find her, Louis continued. And when Emma wakes up, she needs to know her daughter is safe. Mrs. Patterson was already moving around the apartment, gathering Sophie's clothes and toys. I think that's wise. That man has been getting more aggressive. Last time he was here, he tried to push past me to get into the building. He did what? Louis's voice was dangerous. I stopped him, but barely. He's desperate, and desperate people do dangerous things. Louis made a decision. He pulled out his phone and called his head of security. James, it's Louis. I need you to arrange protection. For a child. Immediately. As Louis made arrangements, Zara played with Sophie, who was starting to warm up to her aunt. The little girl was clearly tired and confused, but she seemed to sense that these people cared about her. Bye-bye, Sophie asked, seeing Mrs. Patterson, packing her things. You're going on an adventure, Mrs. Patterson said cheerfully, with your new friends, and Mummy will come find you very soon. Louis finished his call and looked at the small group. Sophie was now sitting on Zara's lap, playing with her aunt's necklace. The sight made his heart ache. This little girl should have been surrounded by family from the day she was born. Instead, Emma had been protecting her all alone. The car will be here in 10 minutes, Louis said. Mrs. Patterson, I'd like you to come with us. Sophie knows you, and she's going to be scared. Of course, the older woman said immediately. I wouldn't leave her. As they waited for the car, Louis's phone rang. Unknown number. Lewis Hamilton. So, you're the famous racing driver, said a man's voice, smooth and confident. I've been wondering when you'd show up. Louis felt cold. Who is this? I think you know. I'm Sophie's father, and I want to see my daughter. Marcus. That's right. Or Mark, if you prefer. Emma's been filling your head with lies about me, hasn't she? Louis walked into the hallway so Sophie wouldn't hear. What do you want? What's mine? My daughter, and the money Emma owes me. Emma doesn't owe you anything. Marcus laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. Oh, but she does. You see, some of those paintings she's been selling? They were created using ideas we developed together. I'm entitled to half the profits. That's not how it works. It is when you have witnesses, and when you have proof that Emma has been hiding assets. Like a secret child she's been using to get sympathy buyers for her art. Louis realized Marcus was even worse than they'd thought. He wasn't just a deadbeat father. He was planning to use Sophie as part of some twisted scheme to get money. You're not getting near that little girl, Louis said firmly. Oh, but I am. You see, I know where Emma lives. I know where the old lady lives. And now I know you're involved. This just got a lot more interesting. The line went dead. Louis stared at his phone, his heart pounding. Marcus wasn't just dangerous. He was actively threatening them. Louis went back into the apartment, where Sophie was now sitting on the floor, playing with blocks that Mrs. Patterson had given her. We need to go, he said quietly to Zara. Now, what happened? Marcus just called me. He knows we're here. Mrs. Patterson looked up sharply. He called you? How did he get your number? I don't know, but we can't stay here. Louis's phone buzzed with a text from his driver. Outside now. Come on, Louis said, scooping up Sophie's diaper bag. Time to go, sweetheart. Sophie looked up at him with those big brown eyes, and Louis felt his heart break a little. This Innocent little girl had no idea that her world was about to change completely. As they headed for the door, Louis made a silent promise. Whatever it took, he was going to keep Sophie safe. Emma had trusted him with the most important thing in her world, and he wasn't going to let her down. Marcus Thompson could make all the threats he wanted, but he was about to learn that threatening Lewis Hamilton's family was the biggest mistake he could make. The black Mercedes pulled up to Emma's apartment building just as Louis, Zara, Mrs. Patterson, and Sophie reached the front door. Louis's driver, Tom, quickly got out to help load Sophie's things into the car. "Everything okay, Mr. Hamilton?" Tom asked, noticing the tension in Louis's face. "Just drive fast," Louis said, buckling Sophie into the car seat that Tom had somehow managed to get on such short notice. "And keep your eyes open for anyone following us." Sophie seemed fascinated by the car ride, pressing her little hands against the window and pointing at the lights outside. She was too young to understand the danger, which Louis was grateful for. "Where are we going?" Zara asked as they drove through the empty London streets. "My house in Surrey. It has security gates, cameras, the works. Sophie will be safe there." Mrs. Patterson held Sophie's hand gently. "It's okay, sweetheart. We're going somewhere nice." Louis's phone rang. It was Margaret. "Louis, where are you?" "The doctor has an update. We're in the car with Sophie." "What did the doctor say?" "The surgery is going well, but it's taking longer than expected. Dr. Chun says Emma's heart was in worse condition than the scans showed. She needs to repair more damage than they thought." Louis felt his stomach drop. "Is she going to be okay?" "The doctor thinks so, but recovery will take longer. Maybe weeks in the hospital." Louis looked at Sophie, who was now sleepy in her car seat. "Weeks. This little girl would need care for weeks while Emma recovered." "We'll figure it out," Louis said. "Just focus on Emma right now." "Louis, who is this little girl? How could Emma keep such a big secret?" Louis looked at Zara, who nodded. Her parents deserved to know the truth. "She was scared, Margaret. The father, he's not a good man. Emma was protecting Sophie the only way she knew how. But we would have helped. We would have loved that baby from day one." "I know. Emma knows that too. She made some mistakes, and then she was too proud to ask for help." After Louis hung up, the car was quiet except for Sophie's soft breathing. She had fallen asleep, her tiny hand still holding Mrs. Patterson's finger. "She's so peaceful," Zara whispered. "It's hard to believe she's been living in the middle of all this drama." "Emma did a good job protecting her," Louis said. "But now it's our turn." They arrived at Louis's Surrey house just as the sun was starting to rise. The property was surrounded by high walls and electronic gates. Louis had bought it a few years ago when he wanted privacy away from the Monaco spotlight. "Wow," Zara said, as they drove up the long driveway. "This is beautiful." The house was a renovated Georgian manor with large windows and gardens. Louis had always thought it was too big for just him, but now he was glad for the space. Tom helped them carry Sophie's things inside while Louis disabled the security system. The house felt different with a child in it, warmer somehow. "Let's set up the nursery in the room next to mine," Louis said. "That way I can hear if she needs anything." Mrs. Patterson looked around the house with wide eyes. "My goodness, Louis. This is like a palace." "It's just a house," Louis said. "But it's safe, and that's what matters right now." They spent the next hour setting up Sophie's crib and organizing her toys. Sophie woke up confused and looked around for Emma, but Mrs. Patterson quickly distracted her with breakfast and cartoons on Louis's big screen TV. "Wow," Sophie said, pointing at the television. It was clearly the biggest screen she'd ever seen. "Do you like it?" Louis asked, sitting down beside her on the couch. Sophie nodded and offered him a piece of her toast. Louis took a small bite and made an exaggerated, yummy face that made Sophie giggle. While Sophie was distracted, Louis called his lawyer, James Morrison. James had handled Louis's contracts for years and was used to urgent calls. "Louis? It's 7 a.m. What's wrong?" "I need help with a custody situation. Not for me, for a friend. There's a man trying to claim parental rights to a child, but he abandoned the mother during pregnancy and now he's making threats." "Threats? Have you called the police?" "Not yet. I want to understand the legal situation first." The man's name is Mark Thompson, also goes by Marcus Thompson. He has a criminal record for fraud. I'll start looking into it immediately. Can you send me any documents the mother has?" Louis looked toward Emma's room. where Zara was going through the papers they'd found in Emma's apartment. "Zara," he called. "Can you bring me those legal documents Emma had?" Zara came over with a folder full of papers. "There's more here than I thought," she said. "Look at this." She handed Lewis a letter from a law firm. Lewis read it quickly, his expression getting darker with each line. "What is it?" Mrs. Patterson asked. "Marcus has been building a legal case for months. He's claiming that Emma has been hiding assets and using Sophie to gain sympathy for her art sales." "That's ridiculous," Zara said. "Emma barely makes enough money to pay rent." Lewis kept reading. "He's also claiming that Emma is an unfit mother because of her heart condition. He says she's putting Sophie at risk by not being able to care for her properly. That man is evil," Mrs. Patterson said, her kind face hard with anger. "Emma is a wonderful mother. Sophie is healthy and happy and loved." Lewis took photos of all the documents and sent them to James. "James, I'm sending you everything now. This guy is trying to use a sick woman's medical condition against her. I'll review everything and call you back within the hour," James promised. While they waited, Lewis made breakfast for everyone. Sophie sat in a high chair that Tom had somehow found and brought from London, eating pancakes and watching cartoons. "She's so good," Zara observed. "Most toddlers would be crying for their mom by now. Emma taught her to be independent," Mrs. Patterson explained. "Sometimes Emma would have bad days with her heart, and Sophie learned to play quietly. But she's still just a baby. She'll start missing Emma soon." As if she heard them talking about her, Sophie looked around and said, Mummy is sleeping at the doctor's house," Mrs. Patterson said gently. "But she'll come see you soon." Sophie seemed to accept this and went back to her pancakes. Lewis's phone rang. It was James. "Lewis, this situation is worse than I thought. This Marcus character has been very clever. He's built a case that makes Emma look irresponsible, and he's claiming financial rights to her art sales. Can he do that? It's complicated. If he can prove they were in a creative partnership, he might have some claim. But the bigger problem is the custody issue. He's filed papers claiming Sophie is in danger because of Emma's health problems." Lewis felt anger rising in his chest. "What can we do? We need to prove that Marcus abandoned his parental responsibilities, and that his current interest is motivated by money, not concern for the child. Do you have any evidence of that?" Lewis looked at Mrs. Patterson. "Mrs. Patterson, do you remember exactly what Marcus said when he came looking for Emma? About money?" "Oh, yes. He wasn't subtle about it. He said Emma owed him money from her art sales. He said he had helped her with ideas for her paintings and deserved half the profits." "Did anyone else hear this?" "Yes. Mr. Ahmed from the building next door was there. Marcus was shouting, and Mr. Ahmed came out to see what was happening." Lewis, put the phone on speaker. "James, we have a witness who heard Marcus demanding money from Emma's art sales." "That's good. That helps establish his real motivation. But Lewis, there's something else. Marcus has filed an emergency custody petition. There's going to be a hearing next week." "A hearing?" "He's claiming that Emma's hospitalization proves she can't care for Sophie. He's asking for immediate temporary custody." Zara grabbed Lewis's arm. "He can't take her. Sophie doesn't even know him." "We won't let that happen," Lewis said firmly. "James, what do we need to do? First, we need Emma to appoint someone as Sophie's temporary guardian. Someone the court will trust to act in the child's best interests." "Can I do that?" "You're not a relative, but given your resources and reputation, it's possible. However, a family member would be better." Zara spoke up. "I'll do it. I'm Sophie's aunt. I should be the one to take care of her." "That could work," James said. "But we need Emma to sign the papers, and she's in recovery from surgery. When can she sign them?" "As soon as she's conscious and the doctors say she's mentally competent to make legal decisions. Probably tomorrow or the day after." Lewis looked at Sophie, who was now playing with blocks on the living room carpet. She had no idea that a stranger was trying to take her away from everyone who loved her. "There's something else," Lewis said to James. "Marcus called me last night. He threatened me directly, said he knew where we were. That changes things. That could be considered stalking or harassment. You should file a police report." "I will. But James, what if Marcus tries to take Sophie before we can get the legal papers signed?" "Then you call the police immediately. Right now, Sophie is legally still in Emma's custody, and Emma asked you to protect her. That gives you some rights. To keep Sophie safe." After Louis hung up, the house was quiet except for Sophie's happy babbling as she played. "What now?" Zara asked. "Now we wait for Emma to wake up so she can sign the papers. And we make sure Sophie is safe." Louis's phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Nice house. Nice security. But I know people who can get past anything. We need to talk." Louis showed the message to Zara, whose face went pale. "He's been watching us," she whispered. Louis immediately called his head of security and increased the protection around the house. But inside, he felt cold. Marcus wasn't just making random threats. He was serious, and he was planning something. Louis looked at Sophie, who was now trying to stack her blocks as high as possible. Every time the tower fell down, she would clap and start over. She was so innocent, so trusting. She had no idea that someone was trying to use her as a pawn in a twisted game. "I won't let anything happen to her," Louis said quietly. But even as he said it, Louis wondered if he was making promises he couldn't keep. Marcus seemed to have resources and connections they didn't know about. And until Emma woke up and could sign the legal papers, Sophie was vulnerable. Louis's phone rang. Again, this time it was Dr. Chun from the hospital. "Mr. Hamilton, I have good news about Emma. The surgery was successful, and she's waking up. She's been asking for you and her family. When can you come in?" Louis looked at Sophie, then at Zara and Mrs. Patterson. "We'll be there in an hour." He said that it was time to tell Emma that her secret was out, that her family knew about Sophie, and that they were going to fight Marcus together. Emma had been protecting her daughter alone for too long. Now she had an army of people who loved both her and Sophie. Marcus Thompson had made one big mistake. He'd threatened the wrong family. An hour later, Louis stood outside Emma's hospital room, holding Sophie in his arms. The little girl had insisted on coming to see Mummy, and Louis didn't have the heart to say no. Sophie wore a bright yellow dress that Mrs. Patterson had picked out, and she clutched her stuffed rabbit tightly. "Ready?" Zara asked, her hand on the door handle. Louis nodded. "Emma needs to see that Sophie is safe and happy." They entered the room quietly. Emma was sitting up in bed, looking pale but alert. When she saw Sophie, her eyes filled with tears. "My baby," Emma whispered, reaching out her arms. Louis carefully placed Sophie on the bed next to Emma. Sophie immediately snuggled against her mother, chattering in her toddler language about the big house and the nice man who had given her pancakes. "Mummy's sick?" Sophie asked, touching Emma's face gently. "Mummy's getting better," Emma said, kissing Sophie's forehead. "I missed you so much." Louis watched the reunion with a tight feeling in his chest. This was what family looked like. This was what Marcus was trying to destroy. "Emma," Zara said softly, "we need to talk about some things." "About Marcus?" Emma's expression immediately changed. She looked scared. Has he tried to contact you?" "He called me," Louis said. "And he's been watching my house." "Emma, he's filed legal papers. He's trying to get custody of Sophie." Emma pulled Sophie closer, her face going white. "No, he can't. He left us. He doesn't want Sophie. He just wants money." "We know," Louis said gently. "That's why we're going to fight him. But we need your help." James Morrison, Louis's lawyer, stepped into the room. He was a kind-looking man in his 50s, with gray hair and a calm manner that seemed to put people at ease. "Emma, I'm James Morrison. I work with Louis. I've reviewed the papers Marcus filed, and we can beat this. But we need to act quickly." Emma looked confused. "I don't understand. What papers?" James sat down in the chair beside her bed. "Marcus has filed an emergency petition for custody. He's claiming that your heart condition makes you unable to care for Sophie properly." "That's not true." Emma's voice was fierce despite her weakness. "I've taken good care of her. Ask Mrs. Patterson. Ask anyone who knows us. We believe you," James said calmly. "But Marcus has been clever. He's painted a picture of a single mother who hides her child from family support and puts the child at risk because of medical problems." Emma started crying. "I was just trying to protect her. Marcus is dangerous. He doesn't care about Sophie at all." Louis sat on the edge of the bed. "Tell us everything, Emma. From the beginning. We can't fight him if we don't know the whole truth." Emma took a shaky breath and began to talk. She told them about meeting Marcus at the gallery where she worked. He had seemed charming and artistic, interested in her paintings and her dreams. "He said he was an artist too," Emma explained. "He showed me some paintings he claimed were his. but I found out later he had stolen them from other artists. When did you find out he was married? Zara asked. Not until I was 6 months pregnant. A woman came to the gallery looking for him. She said she was his wife and that he'd done this before, gotten other women pregnant, and then disappeared. Louis felt his anger growing. Marcus was even worse than they'd thought. The wife, Sarah, told me Marcus had stolen money from his previous girlfriends. He would get them to trust him, then take their art or their savings and disappear. Did you report this to the police? James asked. I tried, but Marcus was already gone, and I was scared. I was pregnant and alone, and I didn't know what to do. Sophie had fallen asleep against Emma's chest during the conversation. Emma stroked her daughter's hair gently. When Sophie was born, I thought we were safe. Marcus had been gone for months. I started working more, selling my paintings, trying to build a life for us. When did he come back? Louis asked. 6 months ago. At first, he seemed different. He said he wanted to be a father, that he'd made mistakes. But then he started asking about money, about my art sales. Emma's voice got quieter. He said we had been creative partners when we were together. He claimed some of my painting ideas came from conversations we'd had. He wanted half of everything I'd earned. That's ridiculous, Zara said angrily. I know, but Marcus is good at twisting things. He started threatening to take Sophie away if I didn't pay him. He said no court would give custody to a sick single mother over a concerned father. James was taking notes. Did he ever put these threats in writing? Texts, emails, anything? Some texts. I have them on my phone. That's good. That helps prove. His real motivation is money, not concern for Sophie. Louis's phone buzzed. It was a text from Tom, his driver. Sir, there's a man at the front gate asking to see you. Says his name is Marcus Thompson. Louis showed the message to James, whose expression became grim. He's at your house? Emma whispered, pulling Sophie closer. Don't worry, Louis said firmly. He can't get past the security. But this proves he's been watching us. James stood up. This is actually good for our case. It shows he's stalking you. We need to file a police report immediately. Emma, Louis said, we need you to sign papers appointing Zara as Sophie's temporary guardian. That way, if anything happens to you, Marcus can't just take Sophie. Of course, Emma said without hesitation. I trust Zara completely. James pulled out some documents. I'll need you to sign these in front of a witness. The nurse can witness your signature. While James arranged for the legal papers, Louis called Tom back. Don't let Marcus near the house. Call the police if he tries to force his way in. And Tom, make sure Sophie's room is locked down. Extra security on that part of the house. Already done, sir. The man left when I told him you weren't available, but he said he'd be back. Louis hung up and looked at Emma. He's definitely watching us. But Emma, you're not alone anymore. You have a whole family ready to fight for Sophie. Emma looked around the room at Louis, Zara, and Mrs. Patterson, who had been quietly listening from the corner. I should have told you all sooner, Emma said to Zara. I should have trusted that you would help. It doesn't matter now, Zara said, squeezing her sister's hand. What matters is protecting Sophie and getting you healthy. A nurse came in to witness Emma's signature on the legal documents. Emma signed each paper carefully, her hand shaking slightly from weakness but her expression determined. There, she said when she finished. Now Sophie has legal protection. Not complete protection, James warned. Marcus can still challenge this in court, but it gives us a much stronger position. Louis's phone rang. It was his head of security. Mr. Hamilton, we have a problem. That Marcus Thompson character just left, but he took photos of the house and the security setup. I think he's planning something. What kind of something? Hard to say, but he wasn't acting like someone who planned to go through legal channels. He was studying the property like he was looking for weaknesses. Louis felt a chill. Increased security. I want guards on the house 24/7. After Louis hung up, the room was quiet except for Sophie's soft breathing as she slept in Emma's arms. Louis, Emma said quietly, I'm scared. What if Marcus tries to take Sophie before the court hearing? He won't succeed, Louis said with conviction. Sophie is surrounded by people who love her. Marcus is just one man, and he's fighting an entire family now. James packed up his papers. I'll file these documents today and request an emergency restraining order against Marcus. That should keep him away from Sophie legally. And if he ignores the restraining order? Zara asked. Then he goes to jail, Lewis said simply. Dr. Chun appeared in the doorway. I'm sorry to interrupt, but visiting hours are ending soon. Emma needs rest. Emma looked panicked. I don't want Sophie to leave. What if Marcus tries something while I'm stuck here? Sophie will be safer at my house than anywhere else, Lewis promised. And Mrs. Patterson will be with her every minute. We'll bring her back to visit you tomorrow. Emma kissed Sophie's forehead gently, then looked up at Lewis. Thank you for everything. I know I should have asked for help sooner. Family doesn't ask for help, Lewis said. Family just helps. As they prepared to leave, Emma grabbed Lewis's hand. Lewis, there's something else. Something I haven't told you about Marcus. What? He's not working alone. He mentioned having partners, people who help him with his schemes. I think he has helped planning this custody fight. Lewis felt his blood run cold. What kind of partners? I don't know exactly. But Marcus isn't smart enough to have built this legal case by himself. Someone else is helping him. Someone who knows how the system works. James looked concerned. That would explain how he knew exactly what papers to file and how to make his case look legitimate. As they left the hospital, Lewis carried a sleeping Sophie while Zara and Mrs. Patterson walked beside him. The evening air was cool and London traffic hummed around them. Are we really going to be able to protect her? Zara asked quietly. Lewis looked down at Sophie, who was sleeping peacefully in his arms, completely trusting that the adults around her would keep her safe. Yes, he said firmly. Whatever it takes. But even as Lewis said it, he wondered what Marcus and his unknown partners were planning. The custody hearing was still days away, and Marcus seemed desperate enough to try something before then. Lewis tightened his hold on Sophie and made a silent promise. This little girl had already lost too much time with her extended family. She wasn't going to lose anything else to Marcus Thompson. The fight for Sophie was just beginning. The next morning, Lewis woke up to the sound of Sophie giggling in the next room. For a moment, he forgot about all the drama and just smiled at the happy sound. Then reality crashed back. Marcus, the custody battle, the unknown partners. Lewis got dressed quickly and found Sophie in the kitchen with Mrs. Patterson, who was making breakfast. Sophie was sitting in her high chair, trying to feed cereal to her stuffed rabbit. Bunny hungry, Sophie announced seriously. Is he now? Lewis said, sitting down beside her. What does Bunny like for breakfast? Bananas, Sophie said, offering Lewis a piece of her fruit. Lewis took a small bite and made an exaggerated mmm sound that made Sophie clap her hands. It amazed him how this little girl could be so happy despite everything happening around her. Zara came into the kitchen looking tired. Any word from the hospital? Emma slept well, Lewis said, checking his phone. Dr. Chun says she can have visitors after 10 a.m. Mrs. Patterson poured coffee for everyone. That man called again this morning. Marcus. He left a message on my answering machine. Lewis's expression darkened. What did he say? He said he knows. Sophie is here, and he's coming to get her today. He said no court would keep a father from his child. He's lying, Zara said angrily. He doesn't care about Sophie. He just wants Emma's money. Lewis was already calling James Morrison. James, Marcus is escalating. He's making direct threats to take Sophie today. I'll file for an emergency restraining order this morning, James said. But Lewis, restraining orders are just paper. If Marcus is desperate enough, he might ignore it. Then what do we do? Keep Sophie safe and document everything. Every threat, every contact. We need to show the court that Marcus is dangerous. After Lewis hung up, his phone immediately rang. Again, this time it was his mother, Carmen Hamilton. Lewis? I saw the news. They're saying you're involved in some kind of custody battle. Lewis felt his heart sink. It's not what the news is making it sound like, Mom. I don't care what the news says. Are you helping someone protect a child? Yes. Then I'm proud of you. Do you need help? Lewis looked at Sophie, who was now trying to share her breakfast with Zara. Actually, yes. I could use your help. I'll be on the next flight from Monaco. Mom, you don't have to. Lewis Anthony Hamilton, don't you dare tell me I can't help protect my family. This little girl is important to you, which makes her important to me. Lewis smiled despite everything. His mother had always been fierce when it came to protecting people she loved. There's something else, Lewis said. The press is already sniffing around this story. Sophie's mother is in the hospital, and the last thing she needs is reporters bothering her. Leave that to me, Carmen said. I'll handle the press. 2 hours later, Lewis, Zara, and Sophie were back at the hospital. Emma looked better today, sitting up and eating solid food. But her face was worried. "Any news about Marcus?" she asked immediately. "James filed a restraining order," Lewis said, "and my mother is flying in to help." "Your mother?" Emma looked surprised. She said, "Anyone threatening family is threatening her too." Sophie climbed onto Emma's bed and started showing her mother a drawing she'd made that morning. It was mostly scribbles, but Sophie explained that it was a picture of Mummy and Uncle Lewis and Aunt Zara. "Uncle Lewis." Emma looked at Lewis with a small smile. "That's what she started calling me," Lewis said, feeling a warmth in his chest. "I didn't correct her." "I'm glad," Emma said softly. "You've been more of a father figure to her in 2 days than Marcus ever was." Dr. Chin appeared in the doorway. "Emma, there are some police officers here who would like to speak with you about filing charges against Marcus Thompson." 2 police officers entered the room. Detective Inspector Helen Torres was a serious woman with kind eyes, and Constable James Wright was younger, taking careful notes. "Ms. Mitchell," Detective Torres said, "we understand you've been receiving threats from your ex-partner?" Emma nodded and told them everything: the demands for money, the threats to take Sophie, the harassment at her apartment building. "Do you have any of these threats in writing?" Detective Torres asked. Emma handed over her phone. "There are text messages," and Mrs. Patterson heard him making threats in person. Detective Torres scrolled through the messages, her expression growing more serious. "These are definitely threatening, and combined with his criminal record for fraud, this gives us grounds to arrest him." "Criminal record?" Emma looked confused. "Marcus Thompson, also known as Mark Thompson, has been arrested 3 times for art fraud and theft. He's currently wanted for questioning in Manchester for selling stolen artwork." Lewis felt a surge of satisfaction. "So he's a known criminal?" "Yes, which helps your custody case significantly," Detective Torres said. "No court wants to give a child to someone with an active criminal record." "Have you been able to locate him?" Zara asked. "We're working on it. He's been staying in different hotels around London, paying cash. But we'll find him." After the police left, Emma looked relieved for the first time in days. "Maybe this nightmare is finally ending," she said, but Lewis felt uneasy. Marcus had been too quiet today. No threatening calls, no appearances at the house. It felt like the calm before a storm. His phone buzzed with a message from Tom. "Sir, your mother has arrived. She's at the house with Sophie." Lewis smiled. Carmen Hamilton was exactly what this situation needed. Someone who wasn't afraid of anyone or anything. When they returned to the house that afternoon, Lewis found his mother in the garden with Sophie. Carmen was teaching Sophie simple Spanish words while they picked flowers. "Flor," Carmen said, pointing to a rose. "Flor," Sophie repeated, making Carmen laugh. "Close enough, mi amor." Lewis watched them together and felt something settle in his chest. This was what Sophie deserved. A big, loving family who wanted nothing more than to see her happy. "Lewis," Carmen stood up and hugged her son tightly. "Let me look at this beautiful child." Sophie was initially shy, but Carmen's warm personality quickly won her over. Within minutes, Sophie was showing Carmen her stuffed rabbit and chattering about the big house. "She's precious," Carmen whispered to Lewis. "I can see why you're fighting for her." That evening, the whole family gathered for dinner. Lewis, Carmen, Zara, Mrs. Patterson, and Sophie. It felt natural, like they'd all been together for years instead of days. Sophie sat between Lewis and Carmen, trying to use a fork like the adults and getting more food on her face than in her mouth. Carmen patiently helped her while telling stories about Lewis as a child. "Your Uncle Lewis was very messy when he was little too," Carmen told Sophie. "He once covered himself in chocolate and tried to convince me it was mud." Sophie giggled and looked at Lewis. "Uncle Lewis messy." "Very messy," Lewis confirmed, making Sophie laugh harder. After dinner, while Carmen gave Sophie a bath, Lewis's phone rang. It was Detective Torres. "Mr. Hamilton, we found Marcus. He's been arrested for the outstanding warrant in Manchester. He's in custody." Lewis felt a huge weight lift off his shoulders. "So Sophie is safe?" "For now, yes. But there's something else. When we arrested Marcus, he had documents with him. Legal papers, photographs of your house, and what looks like a plan to take Sophie by force." Lewis felt cold. "What kind of plan?" "He had detailed information about your security system, your daily routine, even Sophie's schedule. Someone has been helping him gather intelligence. His partners that Emma mentioned. Exactly. We're investigating, but Mr. Hamilton, you should know that this conspiracy might be bigger than just one desperate man. Someone with resources has been helping Marcus. After Lewis hung up, he sat in his study thinking. Marcus was in jail, but his unknown partners were still out there. And they clearly had money and connections. Carmen appeared in the doorway. Sophie is asleep. She's such a sweet child, Lewis. Emma did a wonderful job raising her. Mom, there's something else going on here. Marcus had help planning all this. Someone with real resources. Carmen sat down across from Lewis. Then we'll deal with them too. This family has faced challenges before. This is different. Sophie isn't my responsibility. I'm not her father or her family. Carmen looked at Lewis seriously. Lewis, do you love that little girl? Lewis thought about Sophie, calling him Uncle Lewis, sharing her breakfast with him, falling asleep in his arms. Yes, I do. Then she is your family. Family isn't just about blood, Mijo. It's about love and commitment and showing up when people need you. Lewis knew his mother was right. Somewhere over the past few days, Sophie had become his family, and he would do whatever it took to protect her. The custody hearing is tomorrow, Lewis said. Even with Marcus in jail, his lawyers might still try to argue for his parental rights. Then we'll be there, Carmen said simply. All of us. Sophie will see that she has a family who loves her, and the court will see that too. As Lewis got ready for bed, he checked on Sophie one more time. She was sleeping peacefully, her stuffed rabbit tucked under her arm. She looked so small and innocent. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Marcus might be in jail, but his unknown partners were still out there. The custody hearing would determine Sophie's future. And somewhere in all of this, Emma was still recovering from major surgery. But looking at Sophie sleeping safely in his house, surrounded by people who loved her, Lewis felt something he hadn't expected: hope. Marcus Thompson had made the mistake of threatening Lewis Hamilton's family. And Lewis's family was bigger and stronger than Marcus had ever imagined. The family court building in London looked cold and intimidating in the gray morning light. Lewis adjusted his tie nervously as he walked up the steps with Carmen, Zura, and Mrs. Patterson. Even though Marcus was in jail, his lawyers were still fighting for his parental rights. Remember, James Morrison said as they reached the entrance, stay calm no matter what Marcus's lawyer says. They're going to try to make Emma look like a bad mother. That's impossible, Zara said firmly. Anyone who knows Emma knows she's wonderful with Sophie. Inside the courthouse, Lewis was surprised to see how many people had come to support Emma and Sophie. David and Margaret Mitchell sat in the front row, looking nervous but determined. Behind them were several of Emma's friends from the art gallery, and even Mr. Ahmed, the neighbor who had witnessed Marcus's threats. Emma was there too, in a wheelchair because she was still too weak to walk far. But her eyes were bright and focused. She wore a simple blue dress and looked like the caring mother she was. How are you feeling? Lewis asked, sitting beside her. Scared, Emma admitted, but ready to fight for my daughter. On the other side of the courtroom sat Marcus's legal team. There were 3 lawyers in expensive suits, which worried Lewis. How could Marcus afford such high-powered attorneys when he was supposed to be a struggling artist? Something's not right, Lewis whispered to James. Those lawyers cost more money than Marcus should have. James nodded grimly. His mysterious partners, remember? Someone with real money is backing this case. At exactly 10 a.m., Judge Patricia Blackwell entered the courtroom. She was a stern-looking woman in her 60s with gray hair and sharp eyes. Lewis had researched her. She was known for being fair but tough, especially when it came to protecting children. This is an emergency custody hearing for Sophie Mitchell, Judge Blackwell announced. I understand the child's father, Marcus Thompson, is currently in police custody? Marcus's lead lawyer, a smooth man named Richard Harwell, stood up. Yes, Your Honor. However, my client's temporary legal troubles do not affect his fundamental parental rights. We are here to argue that Sophie Mitchell should be placed in temporary foster care until Mr. Thompson can exercise his rightful custody. Lewis felt his heart sink. Foster care? They wanted to take Sophie away from everyone who loved her and put her with strangers. Furthermore, lawyer Harwell continued, we have evidence that the child's current living situation is unstable and potentially dangerous. Sophie is currently staying with Mr. Lewis Hamilton, a racing driver who travels constantly and has no legal relationship to the child. Judge Blackwell looked at Lewis. Mr. Hamilton, what is your relationship to this child? Lewis stood up. Your Honor, I'm a close friend of the family. Emma Mitchell asked me to help protect Sophie while she recovers from heart surgery. And you have no legal guardianship papers? James Morrison stood up. Your Honor, Emma Mitchell signed temporary guardianship papers naming her sister, Zara Mitchell, as Sophie's guardian. I have those documents here. When were these papers signed? Judge Blackwell asked. 2 days ago, while Ms. Mitchell was in the hospital. Lawyer Harwell immediately objected. Your Honor, those papers were signed under duress. Emma Mitchell was recovering from major surgery and was not in a proper mental state to make such important decisions. Lewis felt anger rising in his chest. They were twisting everything, making Emma's brave decision to protect her daughter sound. Like something wrong, Judge Blackwell reviewed the guardianship papers carefully. I'll allow these for now, but I want to hear testimony about the child's best interests. For the next hour, Lewis listened as Marcus's lawyers painted a picture of Emma as an irresponsible mother who hid her child from family and put Sophie at risk because of her heart condition. Emma Mitchell has been living a secret life, lawyer Harwell argued. She hid her pregnancy, hid the birth of her child, and refused to allow the father any contact with his daughter. This behavior shows a pattern of deception and poor judgment. Lewis wanted to shout that Emma was protecting Sophie, not hiding her. But he had to stay quiet and trust that James would present their side. When it was their turn, James called Mrs. Patterson to testify first. Mrs. Patterson, James said gently, how long have you known Emma and Sophie? Since Sophie was born. I live next door to Emma, and I've watched that little girl grow up. In your opinion, is Emma a good mother? She's the best mother I've ever seen, Mrs. Patterson said firmly. Emma would do anything for Sophie. She worked extra hours to buy Sophie good food and clothes. She read to her every night. She took Sophie to the park even when she was feeling sick with her heart condition. Did you ever see Marcus Thompson visit Emma and Sophie? Only once, when Sophie was about a year old. He came by demanding money, not asking about his daughter. Sophie didn't even know who he was. She hid behind Emma when he started yelling. What was he yelling about? Money. He said Emma owed him money from her art sales. He never once asked how Sophie was doing or tried to play with her. Judge Blackwell took notes as Mrs. Patterson spoke. Lewis could see the judge was paying careful attention. Next, James called Mr. Ahmed to testify about witnessing Marcus's threats. Then several of Emma's friends testified about what a devoted mother she was. Finally, it was Emma's turn to speak. James helped her move from her wheelchair to the witness stand. She looked small and pale, but her voice was strong. Your Honor, Emma said, I made mistakes. I should have told my family about Sophie from the beginning. But I was scared and young, and I thought I was protecting my daughter. Why didn't you tell Marcus about the pregnancy initially? James asked. I did tell him. When I was 3 months pregnant, I told Marcus we were going to have a baby. He got angry and told me to get rid of it. When I said no, he said he never wanted to see me again. Did he provide any support during your pregnancy? Nothing. No. Money. No visits. No help at all. I didn't hear from him for over a year after Sophie was born. When did he contact you again? 6 months ago. But he wasn't interested in Sophie. He wanted money. He said I owed him half of my art sales because some of my painting ideas came from conversations we had when we were dating. Judge Blackwell looked interested. Did you give him any money? No, Your Honor. I barely make enough to support Sophie and myself, and I didn't owe him anything. My art is my own work. Lawyer Harwell cross-examined Emma aggressively, trying to make her look irresponsible. But Emma answered every question honestly, and her love for Sophie was obvious. Ms. Mitchell, Lawyer Harwell said, isn't it true that your heart condition makes you unable to properly care for a toddler? No, Emma said firmly. I have good days and bad days, but Sophie is always my priority. Mrs. Patterson helps when I need it, and my family is helping now too. But you kept this child secret from your family for 18 months. How can the court trust your judgment? Emma's eyes filled with tears, but her voice stayed steady. I was wrong to hide Sophie from my family, but I was never wrong to protect her from Marcus. Everything I did was to keep my daughter safe. When Emma finished testifying, Judge Blackwell called for a short break. Lewis, Zara, and Carmen gathered around Emma in the hallway. You did great, Lewis told her. You showed the judge what kind of mother you really are. But what if it's not enough? Emma worried. Those lawyers are very good at twisting things. The judge is smart, Carmen said, confidently. She can see the truth. When court resumed, Judge Blackwell had made her decision. This is a complex case involving a child's welfare, she began. I've heard testimony about both parents and the current living situation. Lewis held his breath. While Mr. Thompson does have biological parental rights, his current legal troubles and history of abandoning the child concern me greatly. Additionally, the testimony suggests his recent interest in Sophie is motivated by financial gain rather than genuine parental concern. Lewis felt hope rising in his chest. However, Judge Blackwell continued, I'm also concerned about the stability of Sophie's current living arrangement. Mr. Hamilton, while clearly well-intentioned, travels extensively for his career. Lewis's heart sank. Therefore, I'm ordering that Sophie remain in the temporary custody of her aunt, Zara Mitchell, with the understanding that the child may continue staying at Mr. Hamilton's residence as long as appropriate childcare is provided. Relief flooded through Lewis. Sophie was safe. Furthermore, the judge continued, I'm ordering a full investigation into Mr. Thompson's fitness as a parent. Until that investigation is complete and his legal troubles are resolved, he will have no unsupervised contact with Sophie. Marcus's lawyers looked defeated. They had lost, and they knew it. However, Judge Blackwell said, looking stern, I want to see a formal custody arrangement within 30 days. This temporary situation cannot continue indefinitely. As they left the courthouse, Lewis felt like he could finally breathe again. Sophie was safe, at least for now. We won, Zara said, hugging Emma's wheelchair. The first battle, James corrected. Marcus will probably appeal, and we still need to establish permanent custody. But Lewis didn't care about future battles right now. Today, they had protected Sophie. Today, love had won over greed. As they drove back to get Sophie from the babysitter, Lewis thought about Judge Blackwell's words. She was right that his travel schedule was a problem. Maybe it was time to think about what really mattered in life. Sophie needed stability, and she needed family. Lewis was ready to give her both. 3 days after the court hearing, Lewis was playing with Sophie in his garden when Detective Torres called with disturbing news. Mr. Hamilton, we need to talk. Marcus Thompson made bail yesterday. Lewis felt his blood run cold. How is that possible? He was arrested on serious charges. Someone posted a very large bail bond. £500,000. We're investigating who provided the money. Lewis watched Sophie chasing butterflies near the rose bushes, completely innocent of the dangers circling around her. There's more, Detective Torres continued. We searched Marcus's hotel room and found evidence of a larger conspiracy. Professional surveillance equipment, detailed floor plans of your house, and financial records showing payments from an unknown source. What kind of payments? £50,000 deposited into Marcus's account over the past 3 months. Someone has been paying him to build this custody case. Lewis sat down heavily on a garden bench. But why? Who would want Sophie badly enough to pay that much money? That's what we're trying to figure out. But Mr. Hamilton, with Marcus out on bail and these unknown partners still active, Sophie is not safe. I recommend you consider relocating until we can identify the real threat. After the call ended, Lewis looked at Sophie, who was now trying to pick flowers that were too tall for her to reach. She was wearing a yellow sundress that Carmen had bought her, and her dark curls bounced as she moved. Need help? Lewis asked, walking over to her. Big flower, Sophie said, pointing to a sunflower that was twice her height. Lewis lifted her up so she could touch the bright yellow petals. Sophie giggled with delight, and for a moment, Lewis forgot about all the dangers surrounding them. Uncle Lewis, Sophie said, looking at him seriously, stay with Sophie? The simple question hit Lewis like a punch to the chest. This little girl was asking if he would abandon her, just like her father had. Always, Lewis promised, meaning it completely. Uncle Lewis will always stay with Sophie. That evening, Lewis called an emergency family meeting. Emma was still in the hospital, but joined by video call on Lewis's laptop. Carmen, Zara, Mrs. Patterson, and James Morrison gathered in Lewis's living room while Sophie played quietly with her toys. We have a problem, Lewis began, and explained what Detective Torres had told him. £500,000. Emma's voice came through the Laptop speakers. Who has that kind of money to spend on Marcus? Someone who really wants Sophie, James said grimly. But we need to figure out why. Carmen, who had been quiet, suddenly spoke up. Louis, what do we know about Sophie's birth? Her medical records? What do you mean? Zara asked. Well, Carmen said carefully, someone with a lot of money is trying very hard to get custody of a specific child. That suggests Sophie is valuable to them for some reason. Louis felt a chill. You think someone wants to adopt Sophie? Like buy her? Or worse, James said. There are people who traffic children for various reasons. If Sophie has some special quality. No. Emma's voice was fierce through the laptop. Sophie is just a normal little girl. There's nothing special about her that would attract criminals. Mrs. Patterson, who had been listening quietly, suddenly looked troubled. Emma, dear, do you remember when Sophie was born? The complications? What complications? Louis asked. Emma looked confused on the video call. Sophie was born early, and she needed some special medical care. What? What kind of special care? Carmen pressed gently. Blood transfusions, Emma said slowly. Sophie had a rare blood type, and she needed transfusions when she was born. The doctors said it was very unusual. James and Louis exchanged glances. How rare? James asked. Very rare. The doctors said maybe 1 in 10,000 people have Sophie's blood type. They had to get the blood from a special medical center. Carmen stood up suddenly. Louis, I think we need to call Detective Torres immediately. Why? What are you thinking? Children with rare blood types are sometimes targeted by criminals. Not for adoption, but for… Carmen paused, looking at Sophie playing happily with her blocks. For medical reasons. There are people who will pay huge amounts of money for rare blood or organs. The room fell silent except for Sophie's innocent babbling as she played. Louis felt sick thinking about what Carmen was suggesting. You think someone wants to hurt Sophie? Zara whispered. I think someone wants to use her, Carmen said grimly. And they're using Marcus as their way to get legal custody. Louis immediately called Detective Torres and explained their theory. Her response was swift and serious. We'll investigate this angle immediately. In the meantime, you need to get Sophie somewhere completely secure. These kinds of criminals have resources and connections we haven't seen yet. Where can we go? Louis asked. My family has a private compound in Scotland, Carmen suggested. It's isolated, secure, and no one would think to look there. But what about Emma? Zara protested. She's still recovering from surgery. The doctors say I can be discharged tomorrow, Emma said through the laptop. I'm well enough to travel. If I have medical support. Louis made the decision quickly. We leave tomorrow. All of us. Louis, James said. If we're right about this, these people won't give up easily. You could be putting yourself in real danger. Louis looked at Sophie, who had crawled over to him and was now trying to climb onto his lap. She looked up at him with Emma's big brown eyes, completely trusting that he would protect her. Then it's a good thing I'm not planning to give up either, Louis said, lifting Sophie onto his lap. The next morning, Louis's private jet was loaded with an unusual cargo. Medical equipment for Emma, toys for Sophie, and enough security personnel. To protect a small country, Sophie was excited about her first airplane ride, pressing her face to the window and pointing at the clouds. She had no idea that they were running for their lives. Clouds, she announced to everyone on the plane. Big white clouds. Emma, who was now in a regular wheelchair instead of a hospital bed, smiled weakly. She's never been on a plane before. Hopefully, this won't be her last, Louis said, but his mind was on the danger they were fleeing. During the flight, Detective Torres called with an update. We've identified the source of Marcus's funding. It's coming from a shell company owned by Dr. Victor Petrov. Who is that? Louis asked. A surgeon who runs private medical clinics for very wealthy clients. Clients who need organs or rare blood and don't want to wait for legal channels. Louis felt his stomach drop. Sophie wasn't just in danger of being kidnapped. She was being hunted by people who wanted to use her body for medical procedures. Where is this Dr. Petrov now? Unknown. He operates internationally and has clinics in several countries. But Louis, this changes everything. These people have killed before to get what they need. As the plane descended toward Scotland, Louis looked out at the wild landscape below. The highlands were beautiful and isolated, which made them safe. But it also meant they were truly alone. Carmen's family compound was a restored castle on a private island in a Scottish loch. It could only be reached by boat, and the family had their own security team. It's like a fairy tale, Zara said as their boat approached the ancient stone walls. Sophie clapped her hands when she saw the castle. Princess house. That's right, Louis said. Sophie gets to stay in a princess house. But as beautiful as it was, Louis couldn't shake the feeling that they were trapped. Dr. Petrov and his people wouldn't give up easily, and now they knew that Sophie was worth more to these criminals than just money. That night, as Louis tucked Sophie into bed in one of the castle's guest rooms, she looked up at him with worried eyes. "Bad man coming?" she asked in her little voice that Louis's heart broke. Somehow, this innocent child sensed the danger around her. "No bad man can get Sophie here," Louis promised. "Uncle Louis won't let anyone hurt Sophie." Sophie smiled and closed her eyes, trusting him completely. But as Louis left her room, he wondered if he was making promises he couldn't keep. Dr. Petrov had resources, money, and no conscience. Marcus was just his tool, but the real enemy was still out there, planning their next move. Louis looked out the castle window at the dark waters surrounding their island. They were safe for now, but this was far from over. The Scottish castle felt like something from a fairy tale, but Louis knew they were living in a nightmare. 3 days had passed since their arrival, and Sophie was loving her princess adventure. She spent her mornings exploring the ancient halls with Mrs. Patterson and her afternoons playing in the castle gardens with Emma, who was getting stronger. Every day, Louis watched from his bedroom window as Sophie chased butterflies in the courtyard below. She wore a bright red coat that Carmen had found in the castle's storage rooms, and her laughter echoed off the old stone walls. "She has no idea how much danger she's in," Zara said, joining Louis at the window. "That's good," Louis replied. "Let her be a normal little girl for as long as possible." Louis's phone buzzed with a call from Detective Torres. He'd been waiting for this update all morning. "Louis, we have good news and bad news," she said without greeting. "Give me the bad news first. Dr. Petrov has been spotted in London. He's definitely hunting for Sophie. We found evidence that he's been offering £1 million to anyone who can locate her." Louis felt his stomach drop. £1 million. Sophie's blood type is apparently even rarer than we thought. 1 in 50,000 people, not 1 in 10,000. That makes her extremely valuable to Petrov's illegal medical business. Louis looked down at Sophie, who was now trying to teach a castle cat how to play with her ball. She was so innocent, so trusting. The idea that someone would hurt her for money made Louis feel sick. "What's the good news?" he asked. "We've tracked down Petrov's main clinic. It's in Switzerland, and Interpol is planning a raid. If we can arrest him, this nightmare ends." "When?" "Tomorrow morning." "But Louis, until then, you need to stay exactly where you are. Don't trust anyone you don't know personally." After the call ended, Louis found Emma in the castle library, reading to Sophie from a book of fairy tales. Emma looked much better then. She had a week ago. Her color was returning, and she could walk around without getting tired. "Once upon a time," Emma read, "there was a brave princess who lived in a castle by the sea." "Like Sophie," Sophie interrupted, clapping her hands. "Just like Sophie," Emma agreed, kissing her daughter's forehead. Louis smiled watching them together. Emma was such a good mother, and Sophie was clearly the center of her world. No court should ever have questioned Emma's love for her daughter. "Emma, can I talk to you?" Louis asked. "Mrs. Patterson can finish the story." Mrs. Patterson immediately took over reading duties while Louis and Emma walked to a quiet corner of the library. Detective Torres called. Louis said quietly, "They think they can end this tomorrow." Emma's eyes filled with hope. "Really? It could all be over." "Maybe. But Emma, I need to ask you something important. When all this is finished, what do you want to happen? For Sophie, I mean." Emma looked confused. "What do you mean?" "I mean, where do you want to live? What kind of life do you want for Sophie?" "Because Emma, I want to help. Not just during this crisis, but always." Emma stared at him. "Louis, you don't have to do that. You've already done so much." "I want to," Louis said firmly. "Emma, over the past week, I've realized something. Racing used to be the most important thing in my life. But watching you fight for Sophie, seeing how brave and strong you are, it's changed me." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Louis, I love Sophie like she's my own daughter," Louis continued. "And I care about you like family. Real family. I don't want this to end with all of us going back to our separate lives." "What are you saying?" Lewis took a deep breath. I'm saying, I want to quit racing. I want to focus on what really matters. I want to help you raise Sophie. I want to be the father figure she deserves. Emma started crying, but Lewis could see they were happy tears. You would really do that? Give up racing. For us, Emma, I've won championships. I've achieved everything I wanted in racing, but I've never had a real family. You and Sophie, you've shown me what I've been missing. Emma hugged him tightly. Sophie loves you so much. She talks about Uncle Lewis all the time. And I love her. Both of you. They were interrupted by Carmen calling from across the library. Lewis, come quickly. Lewis and Emma hurried over to find Carmen, Zara, and Mrs. Patterson gathered around a laptop, their faces worried. What's wrong? Lewis asked. It's the news, Zara said, turning the laptop toward them. Look, on the screen was a BBC News report with the headline, Formula One star Lewis Hamilton missing amid child custody battle. The reporter was standing outside Lewis's London house. Sources say that 7-time world champion Lewis Hamilton has disappeared with a young child at the center of a custody dispute. Police are asking anyone with information about Hamilton's whereabouts to come forward immediately. Lewis felt his heart racing. How did they find out we were gone? It gets worse, Carmen said, clicking to another news site. Look at this. The second article had photos of Sophie. Someone had taken pictures of her at Lewis's house and sold them to the press. The headline read, The Secret Child That Made Lewis Hamilton Disappear. Someone's been watching us, Mrs. Patterson said, her voice shaking. Someone took those pictures. Lewis immediately called Detective Torres. Did you see the news? We're watching it now, she said grimly. This is very bad, Lewis. If Petrov didn't know exactly where you were before, he does now. The news is reporting that you're hiding somewhere in Scotland. How could they know that? Someone leaked information to the press. Someone who knows your movements. Lewis felt cold. You think we have a traitor? I think Petrov has more resources than we imagined. Lewis, you need to move again. Tonight. Where can we go? I'm sending coordinates to a safe house. It's completely off the grid, but you need to leave immediately. As Lewis hung up, he looked around the castle library. Sophie was still happily listening to Mrs. Patterson read, completely unaware that their safe haven had been compromised. We have to go, Lewis announced. Now. Carmen was already moving. I'll pack Sophie's things. Emma, can you travel? I'm fine, Emma said, though Lewis could see she was tired from the stress. Where are we going? Zara asked. I don't know yet, but somewhere Petrov can't find us. As they rushed to pack, Lewis felt anger building in his chest. Dr. Petrov wasn't just a criminal. He was a monster who was terrorizing an innocent child and her family for money. Sophie seemed to sense the adult stress. She became clingy, wanting Lewis to carry her everywhere. Uncle Lewis scared? She asked in her little voice. Uncle Lewis is just being careful, he said, trying to keep his voice calm. We're going on another adventure. Adventure fun. Yes, sweetheart. Adventure fun. But Lewis knew this was far from fun. They were running for their lives, and their enemy seemed to have unlimited resources and connections as they loaded into cars to leave the castle. Lewis looked back at the ancient walls one last time. It had been beautiful, and for a few days, Sophie had been truly happy there. Lewis made a silent promise as they drove away into the Scottish night. When this was over, he would find a way to give Sophie the stable, happy life she deserved. Dr. Petrov could chase them across the world, but Lewis would never stop fighting for this little girl. Sophie fell asleep in her car seat, still holding her stuffed rabbit. She trusted the adults to keep her safe, and Lewis was determined not to let her down. The night was dark and full of unknown dangers, but Lewis's resolve had never been stronger. He had found his real purpose, and he would protect it with his life. The safe house was a small cottage hidden deep in the Welsh mountains. It was simple but clean, with thick stone walls and no internet connection. Lewis carried a sleeping Sophie inside while Emma leaned heavily on Zara's arm. The past week of running and hiding was taking its toll on everyone. This should be secure, James Morrison said, checking the locks on all the doors. No one knows about this place except Detective Torres and us. Carmen made tea while Mrs. Patterson settled Sophie into a small bedroom. The little girl woke up, briefly, looked around the unfamiliar room, and reached for Lewis. Uncle Lewis stay? She asked sleepily. Always, Lewis promised, sitting beside her bed until she fell back asleep. When Louis returned to the main room, he found Emma sitting by the fireplace, staring into the flames. She looked exhausted but peaceful. "How are you feeling?" Louis asked, sitting beside her. "Tired, scared, but also grateful," Emma said softly. "Louis, what you said today about wanting to help raise Sophie, did you mean it?" "Every word." Emma turned to look at him, and Louis saw something in her eyes that made his heart race. Not just gratitude or friendship, but something deeper. "Louis, I need to tell you something. Something I should have told you a long time ago." "What?" Emma took a shaky breath. "Do you remember that art exhibition in Monaco? 6 months ago?" Louis nodded. He had attended several exhibitions that year, but he remembered one specific night in Monaco. He had been lonely after a difficult race season, and he'd wandered into a small gallery near his apartment. "You were there," Emma continued. "You looked at my paintings for a long time. We talked about art and life and dreams." Louis remembered now. There had been a beautiful woman at the gallery, passionate about her artwork. They had talked for hours, and Louis had felt a connection he hadn't experienced in years. "That was you," Louis said, the memory becoming clearer. "You had your hair shorter then, and you were wearing a blue dress." "Yes." Emma's eyes filled with tears. "Louis, we spent that night together. Just one night, but it was the most amazing night of my life." Louis felt his world shifting. He remembered that night too. The connection had been instant and powerful. But the woman had left early in the morning without leaving her name or number. Louis had tried to find her, but she had simply vanished. "I looked for you," Louis said quietly. "I went back to the gallery, but they said you were just visiting from London." "I was scared," Emma admitted. "You were Lewis Hamilton, and I was just a struggling artist. I thought it was just one perfect night that could never be more." Louis's mind was racing. "Emma, when was this exactly?" "March 15th, 6 months ago." Louis did the math quickly. If Sophie was 18 months old now, and if Emma had been pregnant 6 months ago— "Emma," Louis said, his voice barely a whisper, "why are you telling me this now?" Emma was crying openly now. "Because I need you to understand why I trusted you so completely with Sophie. Why I called you that night from the hospital. I don't understand." Emma looked toward the bedroom where Sophie was sleeping, then back at Louis. "Louis, 3 months ago, I found out I was pregnant again." Louis felt like the world had stopped spinning. "Again?" "The pregnancy was high risk because of my heart condition. The doctors said carrying the baby to term could kill me. They said I had to choose between my life and the baby's life." Louis reached for Emma's hand. "What did you do?" "I made the hardest decision of my life. I chose to live. For Sophie. She needed her mother more than she needed a sibling." Louis felt tears in his own eyes now. "Emma, I'm so sorry you had to go through that alone." "But I wasn't alone," Emma said, squeezing his hand. "In my heart, I knew the father would have supported whatever decision I made. Because Louis, the baby was yours." The words hit Louis like a physical blow. He stared at Emma, trying to process what she was saying. "Mine. Our night together in Monaco. It happened at exactly the right time. Louis, you were going to be a father." Louis felt overwhelmed by a mixture of grief and love. And regret. "Why didn't you tell me? I would have been there for you. I would have helped you through it. I was scared. I didn't know how to contact you. And then when I found out about the health risks, I didn't want to burden you with such a terrible choice." Louis pulled Emma into his arms and held her while she cried. He understood now why she had trusted him so completely with Sophie. Why she had called him that night from the hospital. She wasn't just asking a friend for help. She was asking the father of her lost child to protect her living daughter. "Emma, I am so sorry you went through that alone. I should have found you sooner. You're here now," Emma whispered. "That's what matters." They held each other in the firelight, grieving for the child they had lost and celebrating the family they had found. Louis realized that his love for Sophie wasn't just about protecting an innocent child. It was about honoring the brother or sister she would never meet. "Louis," Emma said softly, "I know this changes things. I know it's a lot to process." "It doesn't change anything," Louis said firmly. "If anything, it makes me more determined to protect you both." "Emma, I lost one child I never knew about. I won't lose Sophie too. And what about us?" Emma asked quietly. "What about you and me?" Louis looked into her eyes and saw the same connection he had felt that night in Monaco. I think we have a second chance. If you want it. Emma smiled through her tears. I've wanted it for 6 months. I just never thought it was possible. They were interrupted by Louis's phone ringing. It was Detective Torres. Louis, we have news. The raid on Petrov's clinic was successful. He's been arrested, along with 12 members of his organization. Louis felt relief flood through him. So it's over? Almost. We still need to round up his remaining associates, including Marcus Thompson. But the main threat is neutralized. What about Sophie? Is she safe now? She should be. Without Petrov's organization backing him, Marcus is just a small-time criminal with no resources. After Louis hung up, he found Emma and Carmen and Zara gathered around him, waiting for news. Petrov has been arrested, Louis announced. Sophie is safe. The room erupted in celebration. Carmen hugged Louis tightly, and Zara started crying with relief. Mrs. Patterson rushed to check on Sophie, who had slept through all the excitement. It's really over? Emma asked. The main danger is over, Louis confirmed. We can go home. But as Louis looked around the small cottage at this makeshift family, Emma, Sophie, Carmen, Zara, Mrs. Patterson, he realized that home wasn't a place anymore. Home was wherever these people were. Emma, Louis said, taking her hands, when we go back to London, I want us to be together. Really together. As a family. What about your racing career? I meant what I said earlier. Racing can wait. Sophie and you are more important than any championship. Emma smiled and kissed him softly. I love you, Louis. I loved you that night in Monaco, and I love you now. I love you too. Both of you. From the bedroom came the sound of Sophie waking up. They could hear her talking to her stuffed rabbit, telling it about Uncle Louis and Mummy and the adventure. Should we tell her? Emma asked. About you being about us. Let's take it slow, Louis said. She's been through enough changes. But Emma, I want to adopt her officially. I want to be her father in every way that matters. She would love that, Emma said. She already thinks of you as her dad. As they walked towards Sophie's room together, Louis felt a peace he had never experienced before. He had found his real family, not through blood or marriage, but through love and choice and commitment. Sophie was sitting up in bed, holding her rabbit and looking around the small room. Mummy, Uncle Louis, she said happily when she saw them. Adventure over? Adventure over, Louis confirmed, lifting her up. Time to go home. Home with Uncle Louis. Louis looked at Emma, who nodded with tears in her eyes. Yes, sweetheart. Home with Uncle Louis. Sophie clapped her hands and hugged Louis tightly. She didn't understand everything that had happened, but she understood love. She understood family. And she understood that Uncle Louis would always keep her safe as they packed to leave the cottage. Louis felt like his life was finally beginning. He had won 7 world championships, but this was his greatest victory. He had found his family, and he was never letting them go. 2 weeks later, Louis stood in Emma's hospital room watching her sleep. She had been readmitted 3 days ago, after collapsing at his London house. The doctors said her heart was struggling more than they had expected. The stress of the past month had taken a serious toll. Sophie sat quietly in a chair beside the bed, coloring in a book that Carmen had brought her. She had been unusually calm since Emma got sick again, as if she understood that Mummy needed peace and quiet. Uncle Louis, Sophie whispered. Mummy wake up soon. I hope so, sweetheart, Louis said, though his own heart was heavy with worried. Dr. Chen appeared in the doorway, her expression serious. Mr. Hamilton, could I speak with you privately? Louis asked Carmen to watch Sophie and followed Dr. Chen into the hallway. Her face told him this wasn't going to be good news. How bad is it? Louis asked. Emma's heart is failing faster than we anticipated. The combination of her childhood condition, the recent surgery, and the extreme stress of the past month has caused significant damage. Louis felt the world tilt around him. What does that mean? It means she needs another surgery. A much more serious one this time. We need to replace a heart valve completely. Is that? Will she be okay? Dr. Chen hesitated. It's a major operation, and Emma's heart is already very weak. There are significant risks. Louis leaned against the wall, feeling sick. They had just escaped one nightmare, and now they were facing another. When would the surgery happen? Tomorrow morning. Emma is awake now, and she wants to see you. But Mr. Hamilton, there's something else. Something Emma asked me to tell you if anything happened to her. Louis felt cold. What? She made me promise to give you this letter if her condition got worse. Dr. Chin handed him a sealed envelope with his name written in Emma's careful handwriting. Louis stared at the letter, afraid to open it. I'll give you some privacy, Dr. Chin said kindly. Walking away, Louis found an empty family room and sat down to read Emma's letter. His hands were shaking as he opened the envelope. That My dearest Louis, if you're reading this, it means my heart has gotten worse, and I might not survive the next surgery. I'm scared, but I need you to know some things in case I can't tell you myself. First, I love you. I loved you that night in Monaco, and I love you now. Finding you again has been the greatest gift of my life. Second, I need to tell you the complete truth about Sophie. I've been carrying this secret for so long, and if something happens to me, you deserve to know everything. Louis, when I found out I was pregnant 3 months ago, I was terrified about the risks to my health. But there was something else I was scared to tell you. The doctors did extensive genetic testing because of my heart condition, and they discovered something unexpected. Louis, the baby I lost wasn't just yours. According to the genetic markers, you and I are connected in a way I never imagined. The testing showed that we have a genetic compatibility that's extremely rare, only found in people who are distantly related. I know this sounds impossible, but the doctors explained that your father's family and my mother's family must have shared ancestors generations ago. We're cousins, Louis. Very distant cousins, but family nonetheless. This explains why our connection felt so instant and powerful. Why Sophie took to you so naturally. Why I trusted you completely from the beginning. We were already family, even before we knew it. I'm telling you this because if anything happens to me, Sophie will need to know about her medical history. And Louis, you need to know that what you felt for Sophie from the first moment wasn't just kindness to a stranger's child. Some part of you recognized family. Please don't let this change how you feel about us. The love we share is real, whether we're related or not. And Sophie needs you, no matter what our family tree looks like. Take care of our girl, Louis. Love her like your own, because in every way that matters, she is. All my love, Emma. Louis read the letter 3 times before the words truly sank in. He and Emma were related, distant cousins who had found each other by chance in a Monaco art gallery. It seemed impossible, but it explained so much. The instant connection he'd felt to Emma, the way Sophie had trusted him immediately, the protective instinct that had kicked in the moment he heard Emma was in trouble. It wasn't just love, it was family calling to family. Louis folded the letter carefully and put it in his pocket. This changed nothing about how he felt, but it explained everything about why he felt it. He returned to Emma's room to find her awake, talking quietly with Sophie. "Mummy tired," Sophie was saying, patting Emma's hand gently. "Just a little tired, baby girl," Emma said. "But I'm going to get better." Emma looked up when Louis entered. "Did Dr. Chin tell you about the surgery?" "Yes." Louis sat down beside her bed. "And I read your letter." Emma's eyes filled with worry. "Does it change anything?" "It explains everything," Louis said softly. "It explains why I felt like I'd been waiting my whole life to meet you both." Emma smiled weakly. "I was so scared you'd think it was strange." "Emma, I don't care if we're cousins or strangers or anything else. I love you and I love Sophie. That's not going to change." "Uncle Louis," Sophie interrupted, holding up her coloring book. "Look, drew family." Louis looked at Sophie's drawing. It was stick figures, a tall man, a woman, and a little girl, all holding hands. Above them, Sophie had drawn what looked like a heart. "That's beautiful, sweetheart. Who are these people?" "That's Uncle Louis and Mummy and Sophie," she said proudly. "We're family." Louis felt tears in his eyes. This innocent child understood something that adults often missed. Family wasn't about genetics or blood relations. It was about love and choice and showing up for each other. "Yes, we are," Louis said, kissing Sophie's forehead. "We're definitely family." That evening, as they prepared for Emma's surgery the next morning, Louis made phone calls to arrange everything. He contacted his team to officially announce his retirement from racing. He called his lawyers to begin Sophie's adoption paperwork. He spoke with real estate agents about finding a family home in London. Carmen found him in the hospital hallway after midnight, still making arrangements. "Louis, you should get some sleep." "I can't sleep, Mom. What if something happens to Emma during surgery? What if Sophie loses her mother? Then you'll be there for her." just like you've been there all along. But I'm not her real father. I'm just someone who happened to fall in love with her and her mother." Carmen smiled. "Louis, do you remember when you were 7 years old and we found that injured bird in our garden?" Louis nodded. He remembered nursing the bird back to health, feeding it with an eyedropper, making it a safe nest. "You didn't care that the bird wasn't yours," Carmen continued. "You saw something that needed help, and you gave everything you had to save it. That's who you are, Louis. That's who you've always been. This is different." "No, it's not. You saw Emma and Sophie in trouble, and you did what you always do. You fought to protect them. And now they're your family, not because of genetics or accidents of birth, but because you chose each other." Louis looked through the window at Emma's room, where she was sleeping peacefully with Sophie curled up beside her on the hospital bed. "I'm scared, Mom. I'm scared of losing them. Fear means you have something worth protecting. But Louis, that little girl in there has already lost one father who didn't want her. Don't let her lose the one who chose her." The next morning, as they wheeled Emma into surgery, she squeezed Louis's hand. "Promise me," she whispered, "if something happens, you'll tell Sophie I love her every day." "Nothing is going to happen," Louis said firmly. "But yes, I promise." Emma smiled and closed her eyes as the anesthesia took effect. Louis spent the next 6 hours in the waiting room with Sophie, playing games and reading stories and trying not to think about all the things that could go wrong. When Dr. Chen finally appeared, her smile told Louis everything he needed to know. "The surgery was successful," she announced. "Emma is going to be fine." Louis felt like he could breathe again. Sophie clapped her hands, not fully understanding, but knowing it was good news that they waited for Emma to wake up. Louis held Sophie on his lap and thought about the future. They would be a family, unconventional, complicated, but real. He would adopt Sophie officially. He and Emma would build a life together. They would honor the memory of the child they had lost by loving the child they had saved. Sophie fell asleep in his arms, completely trusting that Uncle Louis would take care of everything. And he would. For the rest of his life, he would. 6 months later, Louis stood in the garden of their new London home, watching Sophie chase after a butterfly. The little girl had grown so much since that terrifying night when Emma called from the hospital. She was now 2.5, talking in full sentences and calling Louis Daddy more often than Uncle Louis. "Daddy, look," Sophie called out, pointing to a bright orange butterfly that had landed on a flower. "Pretty, very pretty," Louis agreed, walking over to crouch beside her. "Just like you." Sophie giggled and threw her arms around his neck. "Love you, Daddy. I love you too, sweetheart." Louis still felt amazed every time Sophie called him Daddy. The adoption had been finalized 3 months ago, making it official in the eyes of the law. But in his heart, Sophie had been his daughter from the moment he first held her at the hospital. Emma appeared in the doorway, looking healthy and radiant. Her recovery from the heart surgery had been slow but complete. She was stronger now than she had been in years, and her doctors said she could live a normal, full life. "Lunch is ready," Emma called, "and we have visitors coming soon." Louis and Sophie walked hand in hand back to the house. Their home was a beautiful Victorian place in Hampstead, with a large garden for Sophie to play in and a studio where Emma could paint. Louis had chosen it specifically because it felt like a family home, not a bachelor's mansion. As they sat down for lunch, Sophie chattered about the butterfly and the flowers and the cat next door who liked to watch her through the fence. Her vocabulary had exploded in recent months, and she never seemed to stop talking. "Sophie, eat your sandwich," Emma said gently. "Grandma Carmen is coming to visit, remember? Grandma bring cookies?" Sophie asked hopefully. "Probably," Louis said with a smile. Carmen had completely embraced her role as Sophie's grandmother, spoiling her just the right amount and teaching her Spanish words. The doorbell rang, and Sophie jumped up excitedly. "Grandma!" But when Louis opened the door, it wasn't Carmen. It was Detective Torres, holding an official-looking envelope. "Detective Torres," Louis said, surprised. "Is everything okay?" "Everything's fine," she said with a smile. "Actually, everything's better than fine. I have news about Marcus Thompson." Emma joined them at the door, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. "What kind of news?" "He's been sentenced to 5 years in prison. The charges for fraud, harassment, and conspiracy were enough to put him away for a long time." Louis felt a weight lift off his shoulders. "And Dr. Petrov, 15 years, and his entire organization has been shut down. Sophie will never have to worry about those people again. Emma started crying with relief. Even though they'd been safe for months, there had always been a small fear in the back of their minds that Marcus might try something again. There's more. Detective Torres continued. Marcus agreed to give up all parental rights to Sophie in exchange for a reduced sentence. He signed papers saying he'll never contact her or attempt to see her again. Lewis felt like cheering. So it's really over? Completely over. Sophie is safe, and she's legally yours now in every way. After Detective Torres left, Lewis and Emma stood in their hallway, holding each other. They had been through so much together, but they had come out stronger. I can't believe it's really finished, Emma whispered. We did it, Lewis said. We protected her. Sophie appeared in the hallway, dragging her stuffed rabbit. Mummy crying? Daddy sad. Happy tears, Emma said, scooping Sophie into her arms. Mummy and Daddy are very happy. Sophie happy too, the little girl announced, kissing both her parents on the cheek. That afternoon, Carmen arrived with a car full of presents for Sophie and homemade cookies for everyone. Zara came too, bringing her new boyfriend and talking excitedly about her upcoming promotion at the BBC. David and Margaret Mitchell had driven up from Surrey, and Mrs. Patterson arrived with a pot of tea and stories about her new apartment near their house. The family gathered in the garden for an impromptu celebration. Lewis looked around at all the people who had come together to protect Sophie. They were an unconventional family, some related by blood, some by choice, some by chance. But they were a real family nonetheless. Uncle James. Sophie squealed when James Morrison arrived with his wife and 2 children. Sophie had become attached to Lewis's lawyer during all the court proceedings, and James had become like an uncle to her. Hello, little one, James said, lifting Sophie up. How's my favorite client? I'm not little. Sophie protested. I'm big girl now. You certainly are, James agreed. As the sun began to set, Emma found Lewis sitting on their garden bench, watching Sophie play with the other children. She sat beside him and took his hand. Any regrets? She asked quietly. About what? Giving up racing. Changing your whole life for us. Lewis looked at Sophie, who was teaching Carmen's friend's daughter how to make daisy chains. Her face was serious with concentration, her little tongue sticking out as she focused on the delicate flowers. Emma, I spent 15 years driving. In circles, chasing trophies and championships. I was good at it, and I loved it, but it was just a job. He squeezed Emma's hand. This is life. Real life. Watching Sophie learn new words, helping her when she has nightmares, seeing her face light up when she masters something new. This is what I was meant to do. And what about us? You and me? Lewis turned to look at Emma. She was even more beautiful now than she had been that night in Monaco. Happiness and health had given her a glow that no amount of makeup could create. Emma, I spent years thinking I was looking for someone to complete me. But I was wrong. I wasn't incomplete. I was just waiting for my family to find me. Emma smiled and leaned against his shoulder. I love you, Lewis Hamilton. I love you too, Emma Hamilton. Emma laughed. We're not married yet. Yet, Lewis said with a grin. But I'm working on that. He pulled out a small velvet box from his pocket. Emma gasped when she saw it. Lewis, Sophie helped me pick it out, Lewis said, opening the box to reveal a simple but elegant diamond ring. She said it had to be pretty like Mummy. Emma started crying happy tears as Lewis got down on one knee in front of the garden bench. Emma Mitchell, will you marry me? Will you let me be your husband and Sophie's father for the rest of our lives? Yes, Emma said through her tears. Yes, yes, yes. Sophie must have heard the excitement because she came running over, followed by the rest of the family. What happening? Sophie asked curiously. Daddy asked Mummy to marry him, Emma explained, showing Sophie the ring. Sophie clapped her hands. Wedding. Sophie be flower girl. Of course you'll be the flower girl, Lewis said, lifting Sophie up so she could see the ring better. You'll be the most beautiful flower girl ever. As their family gathered around them, congratulating them and admiring the ring, Lewis felt a peace he had never known before. He had found his purpose, his family, his home. Sophie fell asleep that evening in Lewis's arms while he read her a bedtime story. She was exhausted from all the excitement of the day, but happy. Daddy, she said sleepily, we stay together always. Always, Lewis promised. Daddy's not going anywhere. Good. Sophie said with a yawn. Love you, Daddy. Love you too, my brave little girl. As Louis tucked Sophie into her bed and kissed her goodnight, he thought about how much their lives had changed since that midnight phone call. They had faced danger, fear, and uncertainty, but they had also found love, family, and hope. Sophie was safe. Emma was healthy. Their family was complete. Louis had won 7 Formula One championships, but this was his greatest victory. He had protected the people he loved, and in doing so, he had found himself. The story that began with a desperate midnight call had ended with a family sitting in their garden, planning a wedding and dreaming about the future. It was better than any fairy tale because it was real, and it was theirs that we'd love to know where you're listening from. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. It's amazing to connect with listeners from all around the world. If this story touched your heart, please give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for many more interesting and inspiring stories like this one. Your support helps us bring you fresh content every week. And don't forget to share this video with your friends and family. Stories like these remind us about the power of love, family, and protecting those who need it most. Let's spread kindness and awareness together, one story at a time. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you in the next story.